Hello and welcome back to DJ Camera Reviews, and today I'm just going to be doing a little bit of analysis on the box office for the latest Mission Impossible movie. Now, the budget for this is $290 million, which makes it, I guess it probably isn't one of the most expensive movies of all time, because a lot of movies nowadays do have massive budgets because of COVID. But perhaps it's the movie that has been affected by COVID the most. The budget for the last movie and for Top Gun Maverick, the last two Tom Cruise produced movies, which are big action things, were 170 to 190 million. So I imagine this was probably going to be 200, just boost up a little bit because of the scale of the story and the amount of locations they're going to and that sort of thing. And they had to build a real train to crash it at the end. So I imagine that the marketing cost of that this isn't going to perhaps be quite as big as the budget implies, because they were forced to spend that money because of the delays of COVID and the production being halted a few times because of the initial delay in February 2020 when they'd already gone to Venice to shoot, and Venice was one of the worst hit places. Italy was one of the worst hit places by COVID at that time, especially in Europe. So it's perhaps not going to have to make quite as much money as that implies, but the box office was very strong. It is the biggest opening weekend for any Mission Impossible movie, and it's only the second biggest behind Top Gun Maverick for a Tom Cruise movie. It made $235 million globally, which is good, but when you look that actually the last movie did have a bigger opening, it just opened late in China. So that movie actually would have been something like 240, 245. So perhaps even if it's the second best for a Mission Impossible movie, that's still quite good. It came under projections in the US. It was projected to make almost 100 million, or even then 90. It only made 78 million. It did open early, opened on a Wednesday, not a Friday. Maybe that could have affected it. Really, all of this is just speculation. It's a good opening weekend, especially internationally. These movies do well outside of the US, so the money it's making internationally is still very strong, and perhaps is the biggest hope because we've got Oppenheimer and we've got Barbie coming up this weekend, which are both going to have very big openings and probably push Mission Impossible maybe even down to third place, which in its second weekend is not very good, really. But it's a very good movie. It's long, but it is a very good movie. And the target audience for especially Barbie is very different to a Mission Impossible movie. Older people go to see Mission Impossible. Younger people go to see Barbie. Oppenheimer is a Christopher Nolan film, biopic. Tom Cruise and Christopher Nolan are probably two of the most sort of movie people out there. They love talking about film and making proper craft blockbusters that do kind of practical things, practical stunts and that sort of thing. But Oppenheimer is 3 hours. It's longer than Dead Reckoning, and isn't an action movie. So perhaps the audiences won't really be affected, and those movies are going to do really well in America, whereas Mission Impossible could do better outside of America. So the Batman, which made pretty much around the money this movie's aiming for, the last Mission Impossible movie, and then a few other things. In its second weekend, the thing to aim for is about $460 million. If it makes that amount in its second weekend, if it gets to that point, then it will be on for a good thing. If it's less than 420, 400, then I don't think this movie is going to be making any profit because of that massive budget. So I'll probably do a video after the second weekend. So things at the moment, it's not as good as it could be. However, it is $100 million better than The Flash, and $100 million better than Dial of Destiny, the last Indiana Jones movie, were at this point. Those movies completely flopped and bombed. So to compare those two movies with this one isn't really fair. We'll see how it holds with Oppenheimer and Barbie coming out. But so far, not amazing, but pretty good. It's doing not as good in China, but China isn't really a market that matters anymore. China isn't making as much money, or Chinese audiences are going to see the Chinese films now. That used to be a massive market for Hollywood, but not anymore, so that doesn't really matter quite as much. But if you take out China, it's doing better in every other country bar the US than the last movie did. Breaking even the last movie, Mission Impossible 6, at $791 million. If it gets past 791, which would be quite impressive with Oppenheimer and Barbie coming, I think breaking 800 million for this series would be, that's a really good target. It doesn't necessarily have to make $1 billion to be a success, but if it makes less than 700, then I think if it makes around 600, 700, and they lose a little bit of money, I think they will accept that the budget was pushed higher than it needed to be. It's not really the movie's fault. However, I think if it does do 500 or 600 instead, not only is that bad for the industry, that clearly people aren't going to see this movie as strongly as they did before COVID and before writer strikes and all that, and that will be troublesome. But because there is a part one, obviously they're not going to stop making part one, because then they will lose even more money. And perhaps if the second one does better, then they will actually cover the cost of this one as well, even though that might actually be coming out in 2 years, not one, because it could be delayed again because of the writer's strike. One worrying thing could be that if this movie doesn't do very well, then the studio will say, well, the next one, regardless of quality, has to be shorter, so they can, put more screenings in for the next film, or they'll just edit it to make it what they feel like is more marketable, rather than what I really want Tom Cruise and the director Christopher McQuarrie to be able to do. I don't really know whether that will happen, because this movie couldn't really be any better or any more crowd pleasing. Like, I had a few little gripes with it as a die-hard Mission Impossible movie fan, but I had a fantastic time in the cinema, and this is exactly the sort of thing we thought people would want to go see, and it has done very well. 235 million is a good opening. It's below a fair few things. Even this year, it made less than Fast 10 and Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in its opening weekends, but it's above Transformers, Little Mermaid, Across the Spider-Verse, Flash, and Dial of Destiny. So from that perspective, it's a win, really. But we'll see how it holds. I'll be back next week, and if it passes 460, which will be tough, but is possible, then I'll be cheering. If it's lower than 460, then this movie isn't going to do as well as perhaps it deserves and perhaps it needs to make money. So this video was far longer than it needed to be, but I just needed to explain these things. I think on the next episode I'll be saying what is above, what it's below, and we'll try and track how it's going to do in the whole run. But after a first weekend, you don't know how well it's going to hold up in the second week. So I'll be back next week to see if it's past 460 million. Thanks for your time and your love and all that. I get so many likes and so many wonderful comments. It's really pleasant. Why do I even bother doing this, But I'm having a fun time. So I'll see you soon on DJ Camera Reviews. Goodbye.